Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very, very good spirits wherever you are in the world. Today, I am very honored to be able to introduce another interview discussion that I was so happy to have been able to do. This time, it is with our dear friends, Jamie Lorello and Doug McCambridge, from the cinema-related podcast called Good Times, Great Movies. Good Times, Great Movies. The information about the podcast called Good Times, Great Movies will be in the description box below. So I encourage you, if you haven't already, to check out this wonderful podcast, which is about 80s cinema. All about 80s cinema. And just having a good time, having fun, enjoying ourselves with cinema. So specifically 80s cinema, good times, great movies. This is Jamie and Doug. The following discussion and interview is one that I had talking with the two of them over Zoom. So I hope you enjoy it, my friends. I must apologize in advance, of course, for any technical issues that came up. Please accept my apologies in advance, but I've done my best to try to remedy those. Also, we do talk a little bit about some films. Nothing in terms of a major spoilerish type of conversation, but maybe some slight minor spoiler stuff. So I will try to make those conversations known in the description box below. So just in case you want to avoid those, but I'll just leave that information down below. But as I say, nothing of a major spoilerish type of conversation with any of the films discussed. So just some minor, maybe slight plot discussions, but that's about all. But even so, I will leave the information in the timestamp section below, just in case you want to know about that. But overall, well, not overall, but going back to the conversation and thinking back on it, because now now I'm recording this, and it's now been a few days since I actually had the conversation with them. I thought it was really wonderful, and I loved their rapport together. And I was sitting there, and I was so happy, because it was like I was getting my own personalized podcast with the two of them. So I really got a big thrill out of that. I'm a huge fan of their podcast, Good Times, Great Movies. I think it's such a blast, and I recommend it to anyone who likes 80s cinema, who likes to have fun with movies, and who likes to just have a good time and have enjoyable, funny discussions and conversations with friends talking about this thing that we all love, which is the movies. So this is Good Times, Great Movies, the podcast. Once again, the information will be in the description box below. Please check out that podcast. Leave behind reviews for them. Support them in any way you can. And then in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the following interview and discussion with Jamie and Doug from the podcast called Good Times, Great Movies. Cheers. Now, good, we're recording. So, greetings from Tokyo, my friends. This is Daisuke, and I am so happy because we have great guests, not one, but two. This is a wonderful day, and I'm looking forward to this very much, because we have here to talk about cinema two great people, two great experts, film enthusiasts and podcasters, and there's a lot that we can talk about today. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jamie Lorello. So hello, Jamie.
Hello. Hello.
And Doug McCambridge, Douglas McCambridge. So
Hi.
hello.
No.
Hello, it's nice to see both of you.
And it is really nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you for having us. This is absolutely fantastic. We're psyched to be here, definitely.
No, the pleasure is all mine, my friends. And the reason, well, one of the many reasons that I am so happy to have you on is that you have a fantastic podcast, and it's a cinema-related podcast, and I'm a huge fan of it. And so, if it's okay, could you tell us a little bit, just off the top, about your podcast and what it is, and for people who might be tuning in for the first time, just telling us about it. And I'll leave description information in the description box below. But could you just very briefly, or not, just please tell us about your wonderful podcast? I'd love to hear about it.
I'll do the most generic pitch, and then Jamie, I'll throw it to you, and you can
Perfect.
dig in if you want.
All right.
I mean, I think at the beginning of every episode, what we say is every other week we watch a movie from the 80s, and then we talk about that movie. But really what we do is we kind of try and take the piss out of movies, even if they're ones that we actually enjoy. We try and have fun at that particular movie's expense. And I think the other thing is, and I don't know, Jamie, if you agree or disagree here, I kind of use it as an excuse also to watch movies that I haven't seen before and have maybe considered seeing or were certainly curious about.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a lot of fun as a podcast. You called us sort of cinema experts, and I don't know that I would consider myself an expert necessarily, because it feels like we had spoke of this earlier. When we talk about these movies, we're just really having as much fun as we can. It's a hard decade of movies to not have fun with, in some aspect or another, even if they're the more serious or the more action-packed. So yeah, we just take movies from the 80s. Most of our list is cultivated. Actually, it's DP's brainchild. He usually comes up with our lineup. I just give a couple of thumbs up or thumbs down or tweaks here and there. And yeah, we watch these movies, these films, and we have a blast. Just really, we don't just do sort of summary. We really go. I mean, I think sometimes our podcast ends up being longer than the movies because, yeah.
And
well, that's what we do.
Yeah, and it's called Good Times, Great Movies.
Mm-hmm.
And
we should have said that. We're
I'm so sorry.
We're fantastic about
I'm so sorry about
getting our message out there.
Yeah.
It's called Good Times, Great Movies. I'll say it again. Yes. Good Times, Great Movies. It'll be in the description box below, and you have also the podcast, and also like a Facebook fan page, and there are many other places on social media, and I'll try to put all that information for people to check out. But the theme is 80s films, correct?
Yeah, we don't go before 1980. We don't go beyond 1989. And sort of as Jamie said, I tend to choose the movies, but what we try and do is I don't know if you can hear my dog. I apologize.
Well, that's okay. I love dogs.
Oh, okay, great. We try and choose movies around a specific topic, if it's time of year or if it's a specific holiday, or maybe we can, we line up recording or it's dropping on a particular director or actor's birthday. So I like to think that there's a rhyme and reason behind what we choose, but as we'll discuss in a minute, right now we're in the summer of sequels, and that's just because I was totally lazy. And I was like, we'll just do sequels for 4 months. That way I don't have to think about any reason other than that why we're choosing these particular films.
And that's a wonderful conceit, because 80s films are near and dear to my heart. I was speaking with Jamie a little bit before we started, and we were just talking about 80s cinema and the cinema aesthetic, and how it's really its own universe in many ways. And so, could I ask you why 80s cinema? What is it about 80s cinema that inspired you to want to devote this energy and enthusiasm towards 80s cinema discussion on your podcast? So what are some reasons why it was 80s cinema for the two of you?
Again, Jamie, I'll start because how about this? I'll lead up to it, and you can explain why, because
All right.
I don't
Okay.
think I know why. So, this comes into making the podcast in the first place. Is I certainly got into podcasts. It was 2011, 2012, something like that, when I started to listen to them, and like most other people that run in our circles online, I thought, oh, I could do this. Like, how tough is this? And then I thought, well, what would I do it about? And I had no idea. But what I did know is I knew who I wanted to do this with. I mean, that it wasn't even a question in my mind. I don't think I even considered anyone else. I mean, outside of my wife, and I'm not saying I have to say this because she's my wife, I would say that Jamie's my best friend. So, and she's the funniest person I know. So I figured I would do this with her. So I just reached out and I said, hey, do you want to do you want to make a podcast? And I'm not sure if this is exactly what she said, but I'm sure somewhere in there the question, what is a podcast, came up. Um, and then I think once we decided that we were going to do this, I said, how about if I come up with like 3 topics and you come up with 3 topics? And in the end, we went with 80s movies, which is what Jamie chose. And I guess then I could throw it to you, Jamie, and ask you why you chose this, because this was not my choice. I honestly, if before we started this, I was not a fan of the 80s. Like, I was not a fan of the fashion, of the music. The art is offensive in my mind. Like, this was not number one on my, hit list of things that I wanted to talk about. Now, as we've gone, it has been nothing but enjoyable. But I guess, Jamie, why did you even consider this as a topic?
Well, I would say one of the major reasons was I figured we'd have an endless supply of things to talk about. We could do this for a long time into our lifetime and never lose material.
Mhm.
So, but that wasn't one of the main ones. I knew that Doug is a movie guy, a movie buff of sorts. And the 80s just is. It's the decade that we all sort of grew up in. And I realized, like I said, I'm not any kind of an expert on film. I'm not any kind of I realized that actually through the podcast was I thought I was a bigger movie fan than I was. And then I realized I didn't know all these 80s movies. And it was, like Doug said, part of it was to sort of discover some of them that I had not seen and to dive into a world of 80s that I had kind of not been exposed to. And then some of it was just that nostalgic nature, that like, let's talk about something that we both can connect to, something that's going to be wildly interesting, and then something that is just, again, is just reminiscent of a time period that in my life that I didn't know Doug. I didn't know Doug in the 80s. We didn't grow up together.
Right.
But I, just being a kid of the 80s, I mean, I'm the type I want to go back to there, So this was a great way to visit that, with, again, my best friend, someone. Before we started this podcast, Doug and I would have great conversations, and we just thought, well, let's just structure this into something. And like he said, he mentioned it being a podcast situation, and well, what can we talk about that would be a podcast that interests other people? And again, thinking of even our friends and stuff, because again, I don't think either one of us thought that anybody outside of friends and family were going to pay much attention to this.
Right.
And we thought that, well, this is something that besides ourselves being interested in, friends and family would be interested in.
Yeah,
so there's that.
And I think, just to sort of go back a little bit, when you did pitch this as an idea, when this was one of your 3 suggestions or whatever, I mean, you and I, we could and did probably multiple times have hour-long phone conversations about Charlie Sheen alone. So it made sense.
Right.
Once I saw 80s movies, I went, okay, we can do this. Like, we can spend an hour just making fun of these actors or making fun of the ridiculous decisions and the writing in some of these films. And not to say that we only cover bad films either. I don't want to give, if anybody hasn't listened to it, we run the gamut. I mean, we cover things that I and everybody else, I mean, we talked about Back to the Future, which I don't think anyone would come out against. I don't think anyone would come out and say it's a bad film, but boy, did we have fun poking holes in it and making fun of some of the ridiculous decisions made in that particular script.
Yeah, and it's a great lineup that you have, and you have so many episodes. How many episodes do you have so far? It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on 150. We've been doing, we put out an episode every other week. That really is one thing. When we started, I said, I'm going to stick to a schedule, and we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves. So we went, we can watch one movie every 14 days and talk about it. And we really have, we have not missed a single Saturday when our podcast is supposed to come out. So it's been almost 150 episodes. We're in our 6th year of doing it right now.
6 years.
And again, there's still so many that we have not seen, and that I haven't even heard of. And then there's still so many of that we're near and that I do remember growing up that we haven't touched yet.
Yeah.
So it's like a cave. You just keep going deeper.
Right, yeah.
Or like a labyrinth.
I do.
The Goblin King is waiting.
I do always find it amusing how Jamie seems so surprised that there were so many movies made in the span of 10 years. For some reason, I think you thought we'd get to 100 and be like, guess what? We did it all.
We did them all. Yeah.
I don't know.
And you mentioned at the moment that you're focusing in on sequels in the 80s. So I understand, for example, like you covered Short Circuit 2, Road Warriors, Mad Max 2, and let's see, Police Academy 2, Their First Assignment, and many other things. I got like Short Circuit 2. I love Short Circuit 2. I admit I saw Short Circuit 2 before I saw Short Circuit 1. And so it was a little bit hard to figure out what was going on, but it was I did the same thing with Cocoon. You know the film Cocoon?
Oh, you hadn't seen the first one.
And I saw Cocoon The Return, and then I was kind of confused when I saw
Cocoon.
What
are they returning from?
Yeah. So it's like what's going on? And I know I was very young, but then I realized I tended to do that a lot when I was a kid. I saw the sequel first, and then I realized.
Was that purposeful, or was that just because it was time wise?
It
was just because of accessibility. This is VHS, and so and not necessarily knowing what was going on. It's not like now you could just look it up online and figure out what the first film and the sequence of films are, and figure out where to go first. So, and I did that too with like Ghoulies 2. Do you remember Ghoulies 2?
Oh yeah.
I saw Ghoulies 2 before Ghoulies, and then I thought, oh, this is so cool. I love Ghoulies 2, and then I saw Ghoulies, and it was like a completely different world. I was, wow, what's going on? But anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that might be the smarter way. As we've gone through the summer of sequels, it might have been better to see the sequels and not have any like beforehand notion of what was happening.
We've done that with some of these.
Well, with some of them, but not for Short Circuit.
Right, but you didn't see Mad Max.
Oh no.
Neither of us saw the original Star Trek, and we watched the second one and the fourth one for the podcast. So there's this gap in between them that we're unsure of. Again, we do not paint ourselves or try and promote ourselves as film experts. So even if we're watching a sequel, we're like, I don't know. The first one's probably fine. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to pick it up. And sometimes we can, sometimes we can't.
But I think that's really important too, because one of the great things about films, right? One of the great things is having fun with them, and having a good time with them and laughing along. Because, right, it's always good to have a laugh, right? It's always good to feel good because, right, and that's a really important mode of entertainment. And so I always have such a good time, and to hear the two of you and your rapport and the sort of the cheerful glee and the laughter during your podcast, I think is very it's very charming, and you have a very amiable sort of atmosphere and personality. So I love listening to it very much. It's like listening to two dear friends. and just having a good time, which is really the source of all great film conversation, in my opinion. So keep up the great work with that. Incidentally, so we can expect in the upcoming episodes, what was it? So you mentioned Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 4,
Right.
is that right? So we can expect some Star Trek discussion going forward?
Yeah. I mean, we did Star Trek 4 a while ago. A few years ago, we did that. Star Trek 2 is coming up. I don't know when this is going to come out, but Star Trek 2 is going to come up before the end of September. And we are just going to roll right through with sequels through our horror month of October, and then we finally have to stop the sequel thing. It's I think it is, if one thing has challenged us on this podcast, I think it's been this summer of sequels. Some of these movies were pretty difficult to get through.
Wow. Without giving away too much of the secret sauce, what can we, are there any sort of little teasers or little bits of information you can tell us about what you have planned for Halloween?
Yeah, I mean, we surprisingly enough, we're not doing Halloween 2, but we're gonna do Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. We are gonna do Evil Dead 2, which is one of my absolute favorite films. I cannot wait for Jamie to see this. She hasn't seen it. I asked her thoughts on Bruce Campbell, and she was like, I don't know, whatever. So I'm excited for her to see that. And I'm trying to think of the others that I have planned, and off the top of my head, I can't. But just tune in. It's October. It'll be a lot of fun. Jamie came to this podcast against horror movies. Like,
I didn't think I was a fan. I
No.
didn't think, and I thought for sure an 80s horror movie would just be Bad News Bears for me. Bad News Bears, is that one that we've done? Is that 80s or
It's like
70s?
79, I think.
See where we
that's
sometimes
right, I
get
know.
too cuspy.
There's a sequel. We can do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was the sequel, right? Yeah. What
But
was that about?
I think they've ended up being, with a few outliers, I think they've ended up being some of the most enjoyable movies that we've done have honestly been horror films.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a kind of, I still consider it to be, and I know a lot of people do, is a kind of golden age of that genre. But this is wonderful. I'm looking forward to this very much. Wow. So Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, and amazing stuff. I'm looking for, this is fantastic. And I have to ask, Jamie, you had mentioned that 80s cinema was your that was your cup of tea, so to speak. That was something that you were really into, and you are into, and this was the choice to do this was made by you. And so this is really fascinating, which then leads me to the question is, so what are some examples for you? I mean, let's start with 80s cinema since we're on the topic. So what are some examples for you of some really important landmark 80s films for you that you think that they are, maybe you can call them your favorites, or just important for you, maybe when you were growing up and watching films and that led you to the film lover that you are today. So could you give us some examples? I'd be very curious to, and I'd love to hear what it is you have to say.
Well, I think it's different from what I thought was my favorite films from the 80s as a kid, and then what I discovered were my more favorite films from the 80s as an adult, right? Because when I was a kid, like I would say Annie was one of my, I was a kid. I think we've covered some of them that I've like. The Last Unicorn was a favorite of mine as a child. The Journey of Natty Gann, again, when I was a little kid, that was one that I watched quite a bit. And then I had, I wouldn't say it's unusual upbringing. I had my father liked us to watch a lot of mafia movies. So I watched all the Godfathers. I liked Mel Brooks a lot. History of the World Part 1 for a while that was what I knew of history. I didn't think I needed to pay attention in history class unnecessarily. History of the World Part 1 was big in my house for a while, and watching it now, I'm like, Dad, we were little kids. That was a lot of stuff for us to be exposed to, but it was Mel Brooks and he was a lot of fun. Comedy was big in my house growing up. So I liked, let me think. It's ironically enough, I never really got into Woody Allen movies ever. And I know that he's got some good 80s movies, but it was just not something as a kid or as an adult that I watched. This podcast made me aware of certain movies that, again, I did not watch as a kid, and then later on, I kind of fell in love with. As we know, Sleepaway Camp is one of my like. I can't believe I didn't see that as a kid, and now I find it. I love it. Another one from the podcast was that Buckaroo Banzai movie. That was a wild ride of a movie, man. And I don't think I would have understood. I mean, there's no way as a kid in the 80s I was going to get that. But now watching it, I'm like, this is crazy but brilliant stuff. So yeah, it's hard to answer your question because, like I said, as a kid, it's my 80s movies. What I thought was important were the 80s were kid based, obviously. And then Johnny Dangerously, that was another one because it was, you watched movies with your family. And again, my dad being this Italian guy that wanted us to kind of be entrenched in that lifestyle, that's what we watched. And I'm trying to think of other ones from the podcast that were really like, wow. I had never watched movies like Van Damme movies. My brother would watch them, and I did not I wasn't into them till, again, we watch them now, and that blood sport, that was something else, man. So
Bloodsport,
I could go on. So yeah.
That's amazing. So the podcast, this is interesting. So there are a number of films that you, of course, knew growing up and that have stayed with you. And you've mentioned, say, the Godfather films, for example. And then there are another set of films where you discovered and now that you share. That's really fascinating to me. I mean, were there, let me just follow up with that, Jamie, were there, how should I put it? Are there any other films, let's say outside of let's just go broadly here. Are there any, what are some of those films that are important to you? And then take it out of the 80s, take it from any period of time and history for you. I mean, you've mentioned the Godfather films, so that was a little bit earlier, right? In those two anyway in the 70s.
Yeah, so. Two of them were in the 70s. Before that, the 60s. I mentioned this in a recent podcast. Funny Girl. Guy was a big Barbra Streisand fan, I guess, and Funny Girl was one. Later on, I guess. Again, I think it was the influence of my dad. Goodfellas was another one. Again, with comedy, Mike Myers and Wayne's World, and that whole in the 90s, that whole because I was into just that goofy slapsticky comedy. And then I love Wes Anderson. The Royal Tenenbaums is a favorite movie of mine. Beasts of Southern Wild is another movie that I love anything that has to do with, I have an affinity for little kids. So when a movie speaks, in the, to a kid's point of view, I kind of appreciate that. I'm trying to think of other, Doug's got a wealth of this, so I could see him brewing with all of his.
Don't put this on me. I don't know.
No, you're always so good. My movies, yeah.
No, I think that's great. No, I mean, I think that's fantastic. And you have, I'm particularly fascinated by the sort of the mafia films that you said that you saw because of your right and your family, and so and you mentioned Goodfellas and Godfather. I love Goodfellas. I mean, that is.
Oh yeah.
That's the one for me and for many other people. So you have excellent taste, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
No, I should be thanking you for sharing this with us. This is fantastic. This is great. And then Doug too. I have to ask you a similar line of questions. What like for let's start with the 80s, right?
Sure.
What are those 80s films that are that sing to you, that are important to you?
He
Yeah,
does like a song and dance in his
I
80s movies, by the way.
I
Sorry,
did
sorry.
again, kind of just like you said, Jamie. I didn't know that until now. As a kid, I would not have sat there and watched "Can't Stop the Music" and been wildly entertained. But now, as a 40-something-year-old man, I watched that and I was enthralled, beginning to end, with that silly movie. And the thing that I would say, even before I start here, and I think that maybe this is why the chemistry of the podcast works as well, is because I think, sort of as I said, I went to Jamie and I said, hey, we're going to do a movie podcast. And I don't know if that would be your first choice of things to talk about because, and you could see in your background, you read. Jamie's like a cool hippie who would just be fine with like running around in nature and doing a podcast about, I don't know,
The
fairy
leaves on the
houses.
tree.
And,
Yeah.
right, yes, exactly. So, I mean, and I don't want to say that I have, more movie knowledge or anything like that, but it's certainly something that I think I'm more interested in as a hobby. And in my free time, I would choose to watch a film where that might not necessarily be Jamie's first choice. But in the movie, or in the 80s rather, I don't think my 80s experience is very different than any other, you know, elementary school, middle school boy in the 80s. Meaning when I saw RoboCop, that was such an important film. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had never seen anything like that before. It upset me and it interested me in a way that no other movie before that had. So, and I feel like the other thing is, and I've never grown out of loving horror, because in the 80s that stuff scared me so much, but I loved that feeling. I mean, when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, I did not sleep for, I'm going to say, weeks, and it just got me hooked. And I would watch things and scare myself so badly and regret it later. But in the moment, it was something that I absolutely fell in love with. I mean, just walking through video stores, I would just pick things by the box. And I realized at one point, my parents wouldn't get stuff for me, but my grandmother would. She didn't know anything. So there was a time where she rented Predator and Ghoulies for me. And I was, I was like 8 years old, having the time of my life watching these movies. And then was terrified for days and weeks and months after that. But that's really, and like anything else, I loved the blockbusters. I loved, as a kid, Star Wars. I had all the toys and I watched the films. I wore out those VHS tapes. But that was really, I don't think it was very different than a lot of other people in the 80s. I really did take advantage of the of the video stores. We had one right down the street and I could ride my bike there and it didn't cost anything. It wasn't a Blockbuster. It was like, put down $1 and you could rent something. And so I would take my money and that's what I would do with it.
Yeah, the video store experience is even for me is such a valuable one,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so glad I was able to have that experience growing up. There's just something about it, and the small stores, and just walking in and just seeing all these kind of some of them were a bit dusty and the clamshell puffy case and some of the boxes like I always remember, for whatever reason, I also remember the box cover art of the videos that I would always see but would never rent.
Right.
There would always be that thing that would always be there, but I'd never rent. Like, I remember the first, like, I'd walk into my video store and the first thing I'd see walking, because the shelf ended by the door, was the film Night Mother, and also there was also the film Morgan. There was a film Morgan on the other side there, and it would be this big clamshell. Like, what is that film? I should rent, but I do go somewhere else. And then there was the film that would always attract me, and then I was so scared to rent it, but then I eventually I summoned up the courage to get it, which was Extra.
Oh my God!
Extra.
Yeah.
That was a real, that was something else to watch that when I was
I mean, because that box art was fantastic. I mean, the box art, I mean, it was meant to trick kids
Lure
into
you in,
renting
yeah.
movies that weren't
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
And I get very excited now if I'm, browsing Amazon Prime or something, because sometimes they'll use those old box art covers, and then I'll be
Yeah.
so excited. I'm like, oh, I've seen this and it's not 10 minutes in before I realize this is horrible, but it would have been great had I been 12 years old.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
there
mean,
is something. No,
oh,
go
please
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, please. Sorry
No, I
about
was
that.
going
Go
to
ahead.
say the video store experience is like again with the books. I like to smell a book. Like you like to go into the video store and just be surrounded by this, not just the box art and the movies themselves, but there was this feeling of, it's different now when you're on Netflix and just flicking through it. There was like a camaraderie there and a community there, and if there was a movie missing, someone could recommend something else, or again, like you go to a bookstore and someone says, oh, I suggest this for you. I mean, I miss that. I wish that would make a comeback. I mean, it won't, but I wish it would.
And I mean, it's fascinating to think about the changing dynamic of the environment, the consumption environment, and how we think about it now. I mean, now it's still a very glorious time for a lot of reasons, and the accessibility and streaming services and the like, as you mentioned. But still, I have this really warm feeling of nostalgia and also respect for that age, because it really helped to solidify a lot of the things that helped me in terms of my own film watching today. And so I have a lot to thank that time and those people in that era for. But one of the things too, which is for me also a very interesting thing, and you've brought it up, the two of you, which is are there, now that you are watching films again, and for the two of you, sometimes you're watching a film that you maybe saw much earlier in life. Are there films that you saw before, much earlier, much younger, and then now you're seeing them now again? And are there examples of these sorts of films where you have a totally different reaction to a film seeing it now versus seeing it however many years ago? And I'll throw this question I'll throw it to Jamie first.
The Toy was the Richard Pryor movie that we watched for my birthday. I remembered it as a kid thinking it was like this amazing, like, oh my God, he gets this guy in the box and da-da-da. And now I realize how the different undertones that it has. And there was just, again, as a kid, there were things that I missed, like even like sexual content wise and racial things that I just missed in a lot of the movies. But The Toy was when it was a birthday pick of mine and everything. And I that's one that when you brought that up, that instantly I was like, yeah, as a kid, I saw it in this very innocent way. And when we watched it again, it was another one where I was kind of like, what did my parents let me watch as a kid? But at the same time, and gave me, there was another one that I can't think of right now that, like, as a kid gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling, but as an adult, I had more of an uncomfortable feeling watching.
Was it the Hug-a-Bunch movie? Because that
no, the Hug-a-Bunch was amazing. Come on, that's one that came to me instantly when you mentioned that. I'm sure there's others, because again, when you as a kid, you have a totally different mindset than as an adult. But and She's Out of Control, that Tony Danza movie. Like, that was another one that as a kid I was like, this movie is just the bomb. Oh, and that Going Ape, both of our Tony Danza movies I loved as a kid. And then as an adult I was like, boy, I had bad taste in movies as a kid.
I think I told you this. I've never seen anyone in my life get so excited to watch Tony Danza movies as you were when I said we were going to do that.
It was a big part of my, again, the Who's the Boss, and there's that like feeling of like, yeah, I thought he was a bomb.com, and he's a pretty mediocre actor. Very sweet and sloppy on rollerblades, apparently. I don't know if anybody's seen that video of him rollerblading.
I was just, I forget, the other day, for whatever reason, I was walking and suddenly, for whatever reason, I just said out loud, I was just walking somewhere in Japan and I said out loud, oh, Angela, I don't know. I just said it. I don't know why. And then, because it's, and then I don't know if anyone heard me. I hope no one did, but I just realized, sometimes you say something out loud, you
Yeah.
catch yourself. Oh, why did I just say that? I don't know.
Yes.
But yeah. So, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
The way that we look at films now versus the way we did. Doug, what about you? What were some examples for you about that? About films
I
that you had a different reaction to watching now versus
yeah,
watching back then?
I mean, first of all, I think I've seen a lot more of these films than Jamie has. I mean, when I was younger, I saw a lot more of these. Like I said, I use the podcast as an excuse to watch stuff I haven't before, but there are a good portion of these that I've seen before. And it is kind of interesting. I mean, if we had chosen the 90s instead of the 80s, right? I think the three of us, and I can, I'm just using context clues here, Dice K, but I think we're probably all within 2 or 3 years of one another. We don't need to yell at our ages, but I mean, I spent basically the first half of the 90s in high school and the second half in college. And if we were to do that, like that's when my film taste started becoming maybe a little more sophisticated. So I don't know if that type of podcast would be as much fun because I mean, and this is only one example and it's very recent. When we watched The Karate Kid Part 2, and I think I said it on the episode, when I was a kid, I was all in on Daniel. He was fantastic. He was a hero to me. And watching it this time, I really did not care about what he was doing. I didn't care about his story. All I wanted was to follow Mr. Miyagi and this old woman that he fell in love with. And I was so interested in that story now. But I think, I'm older. I'm a father now. It's difficult for me to sometimes relate to these younger characters in these movies that were basically created to be role models for kids or to really grab the younger people that were watching these now. And I find that time and time again. And there are certain things where, and I hate to just pull episodes that we recently did, but it's almost like I can't remember what we did before the summer sequels.
Sure.
Um,
Please.
and when we watched, because we loved Sleepaway Camp so much, when we watched Sleepaway Camp 2,
Yeah.
had I seen that when I was a kid, I would probably be okay with it. But it was so gross. Like it was so horribly offensive. Like it was a movie that almost dared me to continue watching it. Just said, "Oh yeah, you're still sitting there? Here's this scene. See if you can sit through this." And again, 25 years ago, I would have probably been okay with it, and I hated it now.
That's interesting. Yeah, Sleepaway Camp, and then Sleepaway Camp. Yeah, there's a certain yeah, that's an interesting series of films. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the first one was so much fun, and we had a blast with it, and Jamie had never seen it before, so of course she didn't know what was going to happen, and we gushed over that movie because it was so much fun. But the second one just seemed mean. It just seemed, the intent was mean. It was very bizarre and just off-putting. And also there, you're in a certain frame of mind. Sometimes you're ready to see certain movies. Other ones on a different day, on a different time, it may have connected with you a little bit more. But that was a really extreme example of something where I watched and I went, no, as an older man now, with what I know, this is terrible and upsetting. I don't want anything to do with it.
And have you seen any of the other films?
In
Sleepaway Camp. So 3.
I have not seen 3, and I know that they made 4. Actually,
Yeah.
they just made 4 maybe like 5, 6 years ago, something like that. I had not seen that either, no.
Oh, well, yeah. So maybe one day, I'm not sure, if ever you decide to return to the world. I don't know, but there are a number of films in that series, I suppose. So that's
Well,
and then there's
yeah,
always the first one too, right? So
sure. No, and the thing that I always say, and I think I was a little too apologetic. I think during our just a little bit of a spoiler here, during our Star Trek 2 episode, I think I spent the first 20 minutes apologizing to people that like Star Trek 2, and I need to stop that. Like I hope people that listen to the podcast aren't offended by things we say. We are there to make fun of movies. We're there to have fun, and I would hope that nobody would go, "These two idiots don't understand what this movie means." yeah, we're idiots. It's fine. Like,
Well,
we're just on there having a good time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Which is not. I'm not saying that you're idiots.
Right, right, right. No.
What I'm saying is I think you're right. I think the point that you make is great, which is it's about having fun,
Hmm.
and it's about and also it's like how should I put it? There is nothing wrong with poking fun
Hmm.
at something, and especially,
Right.
I mean, it's like poking fun at a film is, I think, a very innocent and very worthwhile endeavor, because
Hmm.
it means that you are going along with it, and it's a very complex relationship that a viewer can have with a piece of
mm,
work, right, with a piece of art.
Sure.
And I think each person has his or her own way, and sometimes a film means a lot to someone. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely for sure. But I always say to people, or at least I try to, which is the idea that even if I had a film that I really really loved, right, and I loved it so much, and I respected everything about it, and if someone came along and started to like did say, oh, I don't like this film, I hate this
Yeah.
film, or poking fun, I always think that no, this is a great opportunity for me
mhm.
to reassess
Hmm.
my relationship with the film. Do I really like it the way I say I like it? And then if I can say yes, well, that was a great opportunity for me to
Right.
reinforce my love of the film.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
if I can hear that and I think, oh, actually, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, I never then I've added another perspective that I didn't have
Mhm.
before. And
Mhm.
Hmm.
also I can add, which is, it is possible I mean, I mean, the human brain is a marvelous computer creation, right? In that
Hmm.
you can have what's the phrase? Seemingly contradictory ideas held at the same time,
Sure.
Mhm.
right? And so you can love and hate something at the same time and
Hmm.
still be consistent. And I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I want to say that cinema, the potential for cinema is so vast and it's so deep that
Hmm.
with great cinema, and I mean great as in like good cinema, what it means to all of us, right? It can be like, what do you mean? It's like, it can be so many things to us at the same
Sure.
time, And so
Yeah.
I love the approach, and you don't have to, you never have to apologize. I don't think you have to apologize at all for any views that you have, even if they might
Yeah.
run, say, maybe contrary to generally
Right.
held views on a particular film, like say, like a popular film from the 80s, right?
Sure. And Dice K, you and I mean, we know people and we listen to podcasts, and we've been on other people's podcasts who can speak very thoughtfully about films that they really like and enjoy. And I kind of knew that, I don't want to say Jamie and I probably couldn't do that, but we probably couldn't do if we did that, if that was our podcast, it would be like that um Chris Farley sketch. Remember the Chris Farley sketch in Saturday Night Live when he had Paul McCartney on and he would just sit there and go, "Remember when you were in the Beatles? Yeah, that was awesome." Like that would just be us going, "Wasn't that movie great? Yeah, that was pretty great. Remember when you did this? It's pretty great." So I just feel like we couldn't do that. I mean, our thing is to have fun with this and have as much
Yeah.
fun with this. And if we can get people listening to sort of laugh along with us, I think that's really what we're after with what we do.
Yeah, a lot of our movie or the movies sometimes do have deeper undertones to it, and a lot more that we could kind of sink our
Hmm.
teeth into. And for whatever reason, we just sometimes afterwards, I think we will have a little sidebar
Yeah.
and like, wow, that was really something there. But really, when we are on the podcast, we're trying to keep it light, even if the
Hmm.
movie is heavy or even if it touches on sort of heavier topics. The Legends of Billie Jean was one that we had a lot of fun talking about. And that was another one that I had never seen, which I was like so mad at myself for
You were
never seeing
so angry at the
because
end of
I
that. You were
felt
like,
like
this would have changed my life
it
when I was a
really would have.
child.
That Labyrinth was another one that I had never seen. And I thought if I had seen that as a child, it would have altered me differently. It would have shifted
Hmm.
who I became. Um, and so, yeah. But when we talked about them on the podcast, there were certain aspects of that deepness, I guess, that extra level that we don't necessarily get into. And I don't think that it's also not that it's private and it's not something I want to share, but it's, and not even that it's not as fun, but it's not as funny, maybe.
Hmm.
And again, we're the theme of our podcast is keeping it all light,
Yeah.
right? So that's what we try to do. But there's definitely been some of these movies that we've talked about, and then afterwards it's been like, oh wow, that was really heavy. What was that other one? Not Red Sonja. That was terrible.
Oh, Red Sonja, was that?
Yeah, Red
Oh.
Sonja was terrible. No, I'm thinking of Red. Oh, why can't I think of it? This is another terrible thing that I have. Doug knows I'm very forgetful.
No, that's okay. I'm even trying to think. Did it have red in the title? What do you?
Yes, it's the one where all the
Red Dawn?
Wolverines. Red
Red Dawn.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yes, that was another one that we had more fun with, but there was a lot there that we could have gone deeper with,
Sure.
especially with the times we're in, and we just, we're going to keep it lighter. Anyway.
No, I think I applaud the approach. I think it fits with your personalities and the way that you interact with each other and the people around you. And I think, I think one of the great joys for me is we get a little sense of who you are, right? And it's not like something that you are forcing. You don't feel like you need to force a kind of film discussion aesthetic that you've seen elsewhere, but that you are essentially forging your own aesthetic, which I think is that I wouldn't have it any other way, my friends. I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you. No, that's nice of you to say.
Yes,
No, it's you're doing a lot of great work, which I applaud you for very much. And I have to ask you also, which is, do you? What about films now? Do you watch a lot of films that are recently released? Let's say when I say recent, we can interpret that how we will. Maybe 5 years, 10 years, maybe 15. I think of anything after the year 2000 to be recent. So
do I.
My opinion, my interpretation of the meaning of the word might differ from others. But what are some other films in the more recent past, shall we say, that you've seen that you that have really taken to you, or you've taken to, these can be. These can be very recent or again, however you want to interpret it. So what are some examples of more recent films?
I saw that movie Midsummer recently. That was a trippy movie.
Which one was that? I'm sorry.
Midsummer.
Oh, okay.
That was trippy. That was when I could be very, like Doug had mentioned. I sometimes will I got to be in the mood to watch the movie, and I got to really be in. I hate. My husband hates this because my husband will watch any movie anytime, and he'll watch the whole thing through even if he doesn't like it. And if I decide 20 minutes in I don't like it, I'll be like, no, I've known for when we were first dating, I'd leave the theater, and he hated that. I'm sure it drives a lot of people crazy, but yeah, so I could be kind of a brat about movies sometimes, but that was a movie that was long but crazy. First one that came to mind. Sorry, go ahead, Doug. I'm sure you got many others.
Oh, no, that's I think I was probably in my mid to late 20s, and I went through like a very movie snobby phase. I would say I started watching a lot of art house, foreign cinema, stuff like that. And I think for like a span of 5 years, that's all I watched. And I wouldn't watch popular movies and blah, blah, blah. And I turn my nose up at stuff like that. I like to think that I've evened it out after a while. I still really do love horror. I've come completely back around, or not even that. I don't think the appeal's ever left. But I still do like to challenge myself, and I'm more of a visual person, in that if a movie looks interesting or looks unique, or and I mean, I'm really just thinking of like Nicholas Winding Refn films like Only God Forgives and The Neon Demon, and those are films that I'm really, really drawn to. And my wife can't stand it. I mean, she can't sit there and watch Ryan Gosling stare at his hands for 15 seconds straight. And I don't know why. He's Ryan Gosling. Who doesn't want to watch that? But she can't stand that kind of stuff, and just weird pulsating tones of music. And it's something that I am overjoyed with. I will get the soundtracks to these and listen to them, of course, with headphones on. But if she hears it, she's like, what sort of bizarre demon chants are you listening to? That is still stuff that on my own I will watch. But in the same vein, my comfort is Mystery Science Theater. That is such a comfort type of film for me, and I will still watch that stuff every night. I feel like I put myself to sleep watching a Mystery Science Theater. I know I'm falling asleep, I'll put it on, 10 minutes I'm out, but I'm so happy to do that. But I will watch recent stuff if I hear something good about films. But as you know, Daisuke, as anyone knows, there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
And what I've really had to start to do because of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and so on and so forth, I really had to start to sort of listen to people that I trust and take suggestions from them. Because if I clicked on anything, as I said before, where the art looked mildly interesting, I would spend the entire evening watching the first 5 minutes of 87 movies and realizing they're all horrible.
Yeah, that's great, because that leads me into my next question for the two of you, which is, how do you find yourselves consuming media these days? Is it more on the streaming services side, or is it more on the physical media side, or a little bit of both? I know it's a really difficult situation with movie theaters at the moment, obviously, but let's stick with physical media and streaming for the moment. So how do you find yourselves watching films these days, in what kind of format?
Yeah, I stream. We have an old collection of DVDs that sometimes we'll go back to, but yeah, I mostly stream off Netflix and Amazon. That's where I'm at. I know Doug's got a beautiful collection that he keeps rolling, but
Yeah, I do. And recently, I don't know, maybe it's the pandemic has made me question where my money's going a little more. So I think I'm dialing back on the collecting. But I love that tactile feel. Like, I love the boxes. I love the booklets inside, stuff like that. So I have a good collection of that, but I stream as well. I really do. And having a wife who does not want to watch pretty much anything that I watch, and also having kids. I didn't go to the theater when people went to the theaters anyway. Like, that's not a thing that I've really done regularly, honestly, since high school. It really has been that long since I've gone to the theater on a regular basis. And I think the last movie before everything shut down, oh wait, no, I saw Parasite, which was fantastic. Not the movie we watched, Jamie, with the 3D lizard or slug monster. I did see Parasite, but before that, I think it was the A24 movie The Witch, and that was like 5-6 years ago. I go to the movies once every 5 to 6 years, let's say.
Well, it's right. It's I'm in a similar kind of situation with you, in that I I would like to, at least, before all this stuff in the world happened, I would have liked to have gone more than I actually did. But because of certain family commitments and work commitments, my schedule was such that it was very difficult for me. So I have therefore a big gap in my film information when it comes to recent stuff. So I like, whenever you have the award season every year, I would never be able to keep up with conversation, because I'd never be able to see most of the films.
Yeah.
And so until way, way after the fact. So
agreed. Same here.
Yeah, for you too, Jamie?
Yeah. And I like to keep up. I like to know but I find that every year there's that whole, like, there's all the nominees, and I'm unaware until maybe 3 years later. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good one, huh? Did that win something? It did, didn't it? I was wondering, and I hope it's okay if we can ask you, what are your favorite 80s movies? What are 80s? Because where do you find comfort in 80s? And is there anything same like what we were saying. Were there ones that you watched as a child that you watch now that are different? Were there ones that you know, that just are everything to you? Are there any ones that we maybe haven't done that you're like, how could you guys have not covered this? Monster Squad. My husband insists that we have to do Monster Squad, and we haven't. He's so angry about it. But is there any, and yeah, what are some of your favorite 80s, I guess? And I hope this is okay now. I'm flipping it on you. But,
Oh wow, no, I'm you've caught me off guard. Wow, that's really amazing. So, wow, that's great. I really, I don't know if I could name my top favorite 80s films ever, but yeah, as I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 79, so it was the perfect time. It was the sweet spot for me. And just to be, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I remember watching all these horror films as a kid, and they were very scary, and I think I watched them way too young, but I still watched them. They had a great impact on me, and I was a big fan of special effects and how did they do that, and they were like, Fangoria magazine also was very helpful for me as well, and all that. But and as far as others, we were speaking as I say before we started recording about how, oh gosh, what are some examples? Let's see. There was, gosh, there's so many example.
I know it's hard. Your mind gets all, same here. I do the same thing where I'm like, I don't, but yeah, what are there any that you,
I guess I could mention Clue. I've talked about it a lot.
Oh,
the film Clue. I really love that's a film that I think I laugh every time I see that film. It's just so clever, and there's so many jokes that I didn't get. And then and then now that I watched it, I think, oh, well, how did I miss that one?
Like, how did I miss that? Yeah.
And I think about that now too. And Daisuke, I know you have children. It's the same with me. Like, even if I'm watching a relatively contemporary movie with them and something comes up for a second, I'm like, oh, this is terribly inappropriate for these kids. But then I think back and I'm like, I wouldn't have known what was happening. Like, this isn't going to, they're not going to remember this part of this movie. They're going to remember the 90% that wasn't, weird sexual content or bad language or something like that. It's pretty interesting because, Jamie, as you said, I've done the same thing where I've revisited films. I'm like, how did my parents let me see this? Or how did I not remember that this was in this movie?
Right.
And it just wasn't interesting when I was a kid.
Yeah, but that's a really good point that you bring up about how, kids, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I saw a lot of pretty intense stuff when I was young.
Sounds
and although
like
maybe,
it,
maybe like I remember, I don't know how it happened, but when I was maybe 6 or 7 or so, I forget exactly, I was one of the first people from the video store to have been able to rent Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, yeah, something like that. I remember, I forget the exact age, but it was, and I was like, oh, because I didn't know.
Did you have the mustache then? Is that what it was?
No, I think I had, my parents were very, very generous in being able to rent, because I couldn't, the people at the video store wouldn't have allowed it to if I wasn't a paying customer, so it would always be through my parents, but they were very, very generous about this sort of thing. And I think for a lot, we didn't know what it was because no one knew what Silent Night, Deadly Night was at the time. I think there was some controversy about it, but that stuff didn't travel to where I was, and so I saw it and I was like, wow, this is a really scary film. I don't know, I couldn't handle it. It was too scary for me, and so even now I have I'm a little bit hesitant to watch it again, and so but because it brings up a lot of like traumatic things,
like
I
trauma.
Think also, there's a lot of things that do that for me from 80s films. Like I saw Jaws 3 very young, and you see it now, and I think people more or less, they tend to the general consensus is that it's one of the lesser lesser sequels, right? And I can see where that is going. But I saw it when I was young, and I thought it was really great and so scary. And there are some scenes in that film that I'm not. Yeah, they're kind of very claustrophobic, and so I can't deal with some of the scenes in that film. They're just too. And even now, like the same is true for I've mentioned before, Superman 3. I can't watch it. It's very difficult for me to watch that. There's a particular moment.
Are you talking about when the woman gets turned into a robot? That was the scariest thing when I was a kid. That was terrifying.
Yeah, and it's Annie Ross. I love Annie Ross, and she's great, wonderful, right? One of the greatest performers, singers, and and that was the most terrifying. I think that could be the most terrifying thing I saw from a film from the 80s. I think, it could. It's either it could probably. It's probably the most terrifying thing, and it came out of nowhere. And I think a lot of people. You felt the same way, Doug? Yeah.
Oh my God, it was so frightening, and I've watched the clip since then, just on YouTube, just out of curiosity. And it doesn't. It's maybe like 10 seconds in that nearly 2.5 hour long film, but for some reason, when I was like, man, just seeing that, it bothered me so much. And the effects are terrible now. You watch it, it's laughable, but boy, as a kid, it was very frightening.
And it was just and oh my goodness, there's I love that film. I love that film. That's great. That's another one that I was just randomly quoting in just walking something, and for whatever reason the like someone was talking about keys, and then suddenly I just it's like both keys at the same time. Oh gosh, I love that film. That's so great. But that moment is a frightening moment.
It's really funny now that you're talking about, especially with your Jaws 3 memory. It's so interesting to think about how we viewed movies as kids. It's so counter to the way that you're supposed to take in, certain art forms, I'm going to say, because I have to tell you, on HBO, and it probably did the rounds one summer, so I must have seen Caddyshack 2 20 times. And years later, like 10 years later, I finally saw the original Caddyshack, and I went, this isn't funny. This is terrible. I had thought Caddyshack 2 was the greatest movie, and it was the funniest thing ever, and it's the exact opposite of what everyone I've ever met thinks.
Caddyshack. Have you spoken about the Caddyshack films?
No, we haven't.
We haven't Caddyshacked.
No.
Have we Bill Murray'd? I don't even think we've Bill Murray'd.
I don't think we've seen Bill Murray. We haven't done a Ghostbusters. We haven't.
No.
Whatever else he was in. I'm sure it was a lot, but I can't think of anything else. No,
there's a lot.
Bill Murray. Yeah,
there's a lot in the 80s. So it's it's just where to go. I think the sky's the limit, right? In terms of the kind of possibilities as far as discussion goes. And I want to say also one other thing, which is and I was talking to Jamie about this, which is I think also 80s cinema. There's also a feeling of nostalgia, but also it's for me anyway. It is because I've seen a lot of those are the first films I saw, and that helped me see films now. Like I see a lot of films through the lens of how I saw films as a kid with the 80s stuff, and so that a lot of it informs me and what I do. And every once in a while, someone will maybe come up to me and ask me about, maybe about online film fan discussion. And sometimes, film fan discussion can be very passionate and very heated sometimes, as we all know. And sometimes people might come to me and say, Daisuke, this conversation came up and, I didn't like it the way it turned out. Can you help me out? Can you give me some advice or something like that? I'm not good with giving advice. So the only thing I could think of at the time, and which is what I've tended to adopt ever since, which is, if all else fails, if you come up with a film discussion online that gets pretty heated and maybe uncomfortable, and if all else fails, just remember, the words, the immortal words of Humongous, Lord Humongous in Mad Max The Road Warrior, just walk away. Right. Just walk away.
Right.
So that's what I always say. That's what I always say to anyone who has something on the internet. If all else fails, just walk away. So yes, even now, 80s cinema.
I know.
helps in our day-to-day conversations.
I'd
And
like to
I'd like to
take
think
the advice of feral kid, and I just go, "Arr!" That's what I do.
that's a great one. I might use
Yeah,
that. Do I have your permission to
it's
use
an
that one?
alternative.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an
right. And then
alternative.
you
Just
throw a
yeah.
metallic boomerang at them, and whatever happens, happens.
And he's with a smile. Yeah. So yeah, that's fantastic. And also I wanted to ask too, which is about what is it? A little bit of a physical media came up in
Hmm.
conversation,
Yeah.
and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and I have to ask you. So Douglas, I don't know if
Hmm.
you know this. I guess you do because we've talked about it, of course. But I have a YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and I have I can say that I think for maybe about maybe 90% of my videos. I have about, I don't know how many videos up there, but about 90% of the videos
Right.
uh, mentions your name. So almost all of my videos have your name. So
Oh
my channel
yeah.
is inextricably linked to your name. And it's like I have a kind of a credits thing, and I mention your name in most of the videos because you designed that great logo or graphic art with like the glasses,
Yes.
and that's the design that I employ. And that
Listen,
I have you to thank because you designed that for me. So logo by Douglas McCambridge. So that
that
comes
is
every time
so
there's like a
nice of you.
family. No,
Yeah.
no, that's for you. I'm so happy because I mentioned my family,
I love that.
and I mentioned like my dogs and my kids and my
Hmm.
wife, and then I mentioned you. So you're always there with my
That's
family.
amazing.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Gosh.
Yeah, no, I really do appreciate it. And that was a lot of fun. I remember talking to you about it, and you gave me some ideas, like some sort of visual aesthetic ideas regarding colors and certain typefaces and stuff like that. And I just remember, I don't think you said anything about the glasses, but I decided to go with it, and I could not find an image of your glasses. So I had to find something that looked close, and then I had to stretch it and reshape it. And I have to say, I used it was a frozen image of you on screen. I stared at that thing for hours one day as I tried to match the glasses perfectly. So no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for continuing to give me credit for that and for using it. If something better comes along, feel free to use it. That's fine. But I appreciate it.
That's awesome. That
I
is
know.
awesome.
I love it. I wouldn't. I think it's just it's amazing. I was so
Yeah.
happy to have received it, and I that leads me to the point, which is also you do a lot of art
Hmm.
too, right? And so I'm not sure if people know this, and I hope it's okay for me to bring it up. But
Of
I mean,
course.
speaking of physical media, you have created the artwork for a number of physical media titles. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, you're correct. It's everything I sort of was. I don't know. Anytime I get a job like that, I am still surprised because it was just it was me saying, all right, I do graphic design. I enjoy it. I also love films. Maybe there's a way for me to merge this. And honestly, it was just sending out emails to these companies. I mean, I follow enough physical media companies on, social media where I just started emailing people, and I was really shocked when there's a small company in Germany called Midori Impulse, and they specialize in Japanese films, but releasing them on MediaBook in Germany. And this guy just reached out and said, hey, listen, our designer just left. This email couldn't have, I didn't have a website. Like I had nothing. This guy just had to take my word for it that I could even do this. And he said, hey, can you get me something within a week? And I said, what's the film? He gave me the title. He said, I don't know where to stream it. I don't know. Here's the title. Have fun with it. And he gave me like one still image, and I did it. And he said, these are great. And he paid me, and I was like, what's happening? Like, it was the weirdest. I've never worked with a client like that before. And then, it was, I got the money for the job and everything. And it was maybe 6 months later, he asked me about another job and so on and so forth. And then a few months after that, these things with my artwork started showing up, and it was all in German. I certainly can't read it, but it was great. And then I started to reach out to other companies and put up a website, and yeah, I got this work. I'm still waiting. And if anybody listening has an in it, I want to do something for Severin. I want to do something for Vinegar Syndrome, and of course Criterion. So if anybody out there knows these people, they're not returning my calls, and tell them I will work for product. I don't care. That's all I want. No, but it's really fun. I mean, it's not my career, so I can go without doing the jobs. I can take the jobs that I want, but it really does, like, it's really, really fun for me and surprising for me to do any sort of work for films because I love them so much. So,
And what are some of the titles of the releases that you've designed artwork for?
this is the part of the podcast where I get up and I walk away for 1
Oh,
second because
sorry about that. Please, sorry about that.
But I have the stack. My eyes aren't that good. Hold on.
Sure. Thank you. Fantastic. And Jamie, I'm so, as I say, while we're waiting, I'm just so thrilled. I'm so glad to be able to speak to you like this face to face. Truly, it's such an honor.
This has been so fun. This has been really, I'm so thankful that you took the time and reached out to us this way. It's been really, it's just, you're wonderful. Doug had mentioned, he said he's really nice. I think you're just going to enjoy, because he does a lot of different guests on different podcasts, and I don't really do that. And this is really great. I can't thank you enough for having us.
Oh no, not at all, because it's
been a blast.
sorry. Oh, not at all. No, I was just saying to Jamie, it's been. I'm so thrilled. I was so honored to be able to speak to the two of you and to her like this. It's. I'm just. I'm really honored. But I'm sorry. Yes. So now you're back.
Now he can see.
I brought over a whole goofy stack.
Please show us. So these are the titles on physical media, like Blu-rays and such, that you, Douglas McCambridge, created the artwork for. Okay.
And this is not what people are here to see anyway, so I will be very brief. But
no, please.
I love it.
From different companies. This is from Shameless. Most of the stuff I do is kind of, let's say, edgy and super gross. I am given films that I would never watch due to the subject matter, but they allow me to design them. This is for some 70s movie that people thought was lost for a long time, and it's really grainy and it's practically pornography, but I would check it out. And this is for Dark Side Releasing. I've done stuff for Shameless. I did this was for 88 Films, and this was so much fun too, because I barely done anything here in the States. And when our mutual friend Dice K, you and I, William Remmers, he was in London at some point, and on Facebook he took a picture of this in a shop, and I was so excited to see this thing that I made in a shop in England. And I just have a few others here. Why Don't You Play in Hell? Super fun. And I'm just surprised anytime I get another job from these people. So I don't want to bore people. This is not me just trying to promote myself, but
you're too humble, Doug. You're too humble. Those are all awesome.
I'll continue to be humble because I'll stop there. But it really is. It's so, I don't know. It's just so much fun to do that, and it's so much fun to get them and then to be able to open them and slide them out of their neat little cases, because I buy this kind of stuff anyway. So it's nice when a company sends it to me for free, I guess.
That's great. No, and the more work that comes your way, Doug, I think the better, because that's really exciting stuff. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And continued success with that.
And I will say again, I know Jamie said it, but I really do appreciate you having us on. I've been watching your channel. I've been watching, you have other people on. And I don't want to say I was a little bit nervous coming on here, but you have people who are very well spoken and very intelligent when it comes to film. And I've been on podcasts where I realized, I guess it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where I've gone on and realized, oh no, I'm not as smart as these people. And I thought I was, but now I'm freezing up. So I appreciate you having us on just to have a fun chat. This has been great.
Oh, no, 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 no. Not at all. The pleasure's been all mine, and this has been just a real I'm so happy. As I say, I'm a big fan, and
Great.
I will have all the information in about your podcast in the description box below. So as a kind of maybe one final question, and I want to just get the two of you. Let's start with Jamie, which is, what can you just leave us with a few recommendations that you might have for us? They can be anything you want. They can be and they don't even have to be film. Based on, I know that you are also a reader as well. So but if you want to stick with film, that's fine. So do you have any recommendations for us to leave us with that we can try to find and watch based off of what you have to say?
Oh boy, I wish I was more prepared for this, because there are some more recent films that I've seen that I would need to recall, because the memory isn't so good. But I did look over in preparation for this, because again, memory is not so good. I looked over some of what we've already watched for the podcast and thought, okay, well, what podcast movies that we've seen? Sure. Again, there are definitely more recent movies that I have seen, but I'm terrible and should have definitely prepared better. But some movies that we have covered in the podcast that I think people should see. So that's, I guess, the question I'll answer. That's okay. The movie Rhinestone will change your life if you just take the time with it. It will change your life. Again, Buckaroo Banzai. Zorro the Gay Blade was another one that was just so fun for us that I hadn't seen. Labyrinth, which I know a lot of people have seen, but I didn't. A movie, again, I guess I'm going a roundabout of answering your question, and I'm sorry. I'm just formulating it into my own. Okay. A movie that I think that we've seen that was very disturbing, that I don't recommend unless you want to be extremely uncomfortable, is that Star 80 movie.
Oh my God.
That was really bad news bears for me. I did not enjoy that.
Wait, are you recommending this? I'm so confused
bad news
right
bears,
now.
like it was bad.
Okay, all right.
Star 80, no good. But yeah, so yeah, I definitely have seen. There was again, I'm terrible with movie names, so I would have to look them up, the ones that I've seen recently. Aside from that Midsummer that I just shouted out because it came right to my brain. There was another comedy I saw recently, but again, I can't think of it, and I could sit here and for you guys for a little bit. But yeah, those are a couple of recommendations from the movies that we have seen that are 80s based. So as Doug talks, if I think of anything, I'll just politely interrupt him and just throw another one out there at you.
I think I'm going to be pretty quick, though. I would say that if people do listen to our podcast, and maybe it's not for you, or maybe you're getting tired of what we're talking about, I would fast forward to the end when we make recommendations, because Jamie has a tendency to make some amazing recommendations at the end that have nothing to do with films. One time she recommended a segment of the Today Show. Like, it was just a segment of it. She's recommended YouTube videos. You once recommended a yoga,
it was for cat people. It was for cat people, and the yoga teacher talks about being a cheetah, much like they become animals. Yeah, it was relevant. Okay. It just wasn't a movie. Yeah.
That brings me to, I'm going to recommend I'm going to recommend one movie from our podcast, and then I'll just recommend something I have behind me here. One movie from our podcast, and this goes even deeper into, stuff you saw as a kid that now you saw as an adult, and you like it more, you like it less. We watched that movie, Cat People, and I hated it when we watched it. I thought it was horrible, but it was a movie that, this is probably 2 years later, Jamie? It has stuck with me so much, and I think it's one of my favorite movies that we've talked about. When instantly after watching it, I was so angry, and even in talking about it, I was like, this was terrible, and I don't know what they're doing, and afterwards thinking about it, I think it's pretty brilliant now, which is crazy.
Well, fascinating. That's over 2 years when you first saw it.
Yeah, and I make it a point to buy the physical media releases of the horror movies that we do on the podcast. It's just something fun, so I have them to look back on. And I recently looked and I noticed that there is a commentary with Paul Schrader on it, and I am dying to check that out now that I want to watch that super gross weird movie again. And the other thing that I would recommend if we're talking about physical media here
Please.
is the Hodorowski set. I don't know if you have received it, Dice K. It is wonderful. I think the US release is, I think it's on hold or something. This is the UK edition, but it's got Fando Elise, it's got The Holy Mountain, it's got El Topo. These are movies that, again, when I was in my late 20s and I was like, I'm going to get into art house cinema, I watched these and this stuff blew my mind. And I watched El Topo again, and it's as fascinating and bizarre and interesting as I remember. And Arrow does amazing work. Like their box sets are, without it, they're the best box sets I've ever seen. And they do it with some movies that probably don't deserve that kind of care and treatment, and that's bad to say, but they do such an amazing job, and this is fantastic. So.
Oh, well done. Well done. Yes, I
Yeah.
echo your sentiments about Jodorowsky very much. I was very fortunate to have been able to see El Topo and the Holy Mountain screened in the
Really?
theater in New York many years ago. And actually, Alejandro Jodorowsky was there.
Oh, okay.
And so
Wow.
he was taking questions, and it was marvelous. And he was speaking about, and he was such a great gentleman. And he was talking about Alan Klein and Alan Klein this and Alan Klein that, and it was really it was fantastic stuff. So
I think
I'm so glad.
he's 90 years old. I think
Wow.
he's 90. I saw in some interviews in here. It's like, boy, to look that good at 90, I couldn't even imagine.
Amazing. He's one of the premier artists. So you're absolutely right about Arrow and that set. So thank you so much for this. So, and so Jamie and Doug, thank you so much for your very valuable and precious time today. I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun, and this has been kind of like my own personal podcast. You've given I've been so fortunate to sort of sit in, and you've graced me with a special podcast of my own. So I really want to thank you very much.
Can I ask you one final question before we wrap up here?
Please.
We get so many suggestions from people on social media and so on and so forth. And I always, I'm very nice to people. And I say, oh, that's an interesting idea, and maybe I'll file it away. Is there anything you want us to talk about? Because I will totally put it on the list.
Well, you've already started with Police Academy 2.
Okay. Maybe don't listen to that episode if you really
don't worry about it. I'm okay with that. I was talking about Police Academy 2. I was just talking about with someone the other day about the Mauser scene and the shampoo.
Oh yeah.
And I was just talking about and I was saying I was just singing that song the other day, he says, Captain Mauser, yowzer, that, remember that? And he's like, oh yeah, oh yeah,
it's just nonsense. It's great.
And I love how he says at the end, he doesn't say Proctor like Captain Harris does or anything. He says Proctor. He says Proctor. He says, I love the way he pronounces it. But no. So there'd be that, or maybe I don't know what. Gosh.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no.
If you want us to do My Dinner with Andre, we'll do that. I'm sure we could have a ball with that.
Oh, no, I'm quite honored. I suppose, have you done things like, please forgive me for not knowing, but have you done things like Cloak and Dagger?
No, that would be super fun though.
I've recently been re-exploring the works of Richard Franklin. So like, and that has a great, Dabney Coleman is in that one.
Yeah,
that would be great. Or some films that I like. I know you've done films like Space Camp, Flight of the Navigator.
We haven't done Flight of the Navigator.
I was a little confused, and when we did Explorers for a little while, I thought it was Flight of the Navigator, and I was very disappointed when I realized, oh no, this is Explorers.
Okay, so there's so that might be an like Flight of the Navigator. I'm also a big fan. I know it doesn't get that much love, but I really like Jaws. Was Jaws 4? That was from
The
the
one where
80s.
the shark follows her
yes.
to Florida or something, or
Yeah, the Bahamas. And
the
so
Bahamas.
I think I don't know. I mean that's a kind of film plot line that we actually saw in Jaws 2 a little bit, and so
yep.
So I think there's a little bit of continuity. So I don't know, but anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about Jaws 4 if ever you're interested in that. I actually saw that in the theater. I saw Jaws 4 in the theater, and there was with my mom. And so it was great, and it had an ending that was, I don't want to say too much, but it was very different from it has different endings, and I saw the film with one ending, and then I saw the film again on TV with a completely different ending, and it changed the whole dynamic of the film for me. But
that was another one that I saw when I was a kid, when that guy gets his arm ripped off. I think at the beginning of that was very disturbing too. That really bothered me as a kid.
So but that was kind of a scary. So there's that, or there's one more that I was gonna say. Gosh, what was it? It's on the tip of my tongue. You've done things like the Neverending Story.
We have not. No.
Oh, really?
That's a big.
No, and that's another one. See, that's one I forgot that was a big part of my childhood.
Yeah.
See, there's so many that
I don't know that I could watch that horse die. I don't know that I could watch that horse die.
Yeah. That's tough. That's really tough. But I think there could be a lot of maybe those come to mind. Those come to mind now because of what I've seen. So if ever the opportunity. Oh, Ghoulies 2 also. I'm a big fan of Ghoulies
you had mentioned Ghoulies. Yeah.
So if ever that comes up, I'd love to hear. But of course, no pressure, my friends.
No, you just listen. You programmed our next year.
Yeah, so exactly. I think you gave us some magnificent suggestions.
Yes.
And I think that
I think we really do have to do Clue at some point.
Oh,
I mean, the fact that we made it, we're in our 6th year without doing Clue seems like a crime. It almost seems like we're intentionally not doing it like Monster Squad.
Oh, but you're saving it for, the best times.
That's right. That's what it is. Yeah.
Right.
So that's fantastic. Well, I look forward to those and to many others and to the episodes that you're going to be uploading and posting. Good times, great movies. So I'm looking forward to this very much. So and lastly, when can we expect the next episode?
They come out every other Saturday. So right now it is the 12th. I think it will be, it'll be next Saturday. Next Saturday will be the next episode. And we're on a 2-week cycle. And other than one time when we lost, what was it, Jamie? The driving movie, the License to Drive. That was our only messed up. That was the only time we ever missed a drop. So in almost 6 years, we've never missed. So you can count on us like clockwork. Every other Saturday, you'll have a new episode.
Oh, wonderful! I look forward to it very much. So, so thank you so much.
Thank you
for this. So Jamie and Doug.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. This has been really, really, really sweet, really nice. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, would it be okay if we did it again sometime soon?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
There are many other films that I'd love to ask you about. So and like Jamie, you just scratched the surface. I want to ask you so much more about like mafia, like all that. This is incredible stuff, and just and then maybe we can talk about those great books in the background there. I didn't get a chance to ask you, but
I would love it. Yeah, I would. Yes.
Oh, so
I seem prepared to talk truly 80s, but I will open my mind up for the next time.
Oh, fantastic, my friend, fantastic. So let's do this again very soon, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Of course. No, this has been so much fun. More than happy to jump on anytime you want, Daisuke.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my friend. So thank you. So Jamie and Doug, thank you, and we will talk of it again very soon. So be well, stay safe, and cheers, my friends. Thank you.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. Good. Thanks.